Last year's election brought several changes in the face of Boston politics, most notably the women who beat the odds against incumbents. One of them is our guest, the new state representative for parts of Jamaica Plain, Mission Hill, Rosendale, and Brookline. We'd like to welcome Nika Elugardo. Thank you very much for being with us, Nika.
Thanks for having me back.
I want to start with what happened last year in the election, because you beat somebody that a lot of people liked. He'd been around, he had roots in the neighborhood, and you ran a campaign that put you in there and said, what happened?
Well, like you mentioned, Rep was well liked and he's a good guy. And so we were really setting up a distinction between two different kinds of leadership. So one that's a more traditional form of political leadership that navigates transactions primarily for your people, whoever you define those people to be in the district. And another that's looking at structural change. And I think because of what's going on nationally, federally, especially in DC, a lot of people were open to structural change over transactional dynamics, which I can break down if you want, but that's the basics.
I also wonder about the voters you contact. You spent a lot of time knocking on doors, and I guess also figuring out which doors to knock on. What did that generate?
Well, the thing that we knew is that Rep. Sanchez and I both had very likable stories and personas. Both had been committed to our communities. And so people had to meet me and see the distinction in the details. And that's why knocking on doors was so important. So we wanted to knock on the doors of people who were deeply interested not only in politics, but in policy. And I have strong roots in policy, but also ideas from the community that I've compiled that were really compelling to people. Now,
one strategy I know that Ayanna Pressley used in her campaign was identifying people who don't usually come out to vote and making sure they did it this time. Did you do some of that too?
Nope. I identified people that vote a lot. I went off the reservation on a regular basis when I ran into people who weren't voters and spent time with them. But that was more because I wanted them to know, should I have the honor to win, I would be their rep as well, and not just the super voters.
Well, one of the issues you focused on during the campaign is getting a lot more attention right now. I think Senator Sonia Chang Diaz has come out with her, refiling her new attempt to increase the foundation budget for local school districts. People say, well, that's insider baseball. What does that have to do with the struggles of students like those valedictorians that Globe wrote about recently?
Right. You can't really run a school system if it's not fully funded. And according to Mass Budget and Policy Center, our schools haven't been fully funded in almost 20 years. And recently, they've been underfunded at about $1 billion a year. So that's a big difference. Imagine telling the electric company, I'm going to pay 35%, 40% of my electric bill. Even though I have the money, I need to spend it on other things. You're not going to get 35% of your electricity. And so that's the kind of thing that systems and districts like Boston Public School have been struggling with. The teachers and the administrators, the students, and the parents have been admirable in their struggle to stay afloat, but they really need the money to make sure they have all the resources.
Now, there's talk about maybe doing this incrementally over a period of 7 years. You add another billion. Is that enough money quick enough, or do you think it's got to be more than that?
Well, we have to take our time because the factors we're looking at, like changes in healthcare costs, are things that are very dynamic. And so it's important to spread the love, so to speak, over at least 5 years. And if we do it that way, and some other changes that have been made to the bill vis-a-vis the bill last year that didn't benefit as many districts, then we can make sure that no district is worse off, and almost all the districts across the state will be much better off at the end of 5 to 7 years.
Another issue that was big in this district is housing, as it is in many other parts of the city.
Yeah.
Anything in particular you'd like to move on with that?
Housing is really exciting. There are a lot of people trying to think about what to do, and we've got the whole range from wonky technical proposals like mine to big picture proposals like Mike Connolly and others, and I've signed on to all of those that are looking for options at the municipal level. And that's the real thing I think we need to release this time, and that's what a lot of the bills have in common, letting local municipalities determine what they need to do to solve their individual crises, because the issues aren't the same. They may have the same result, not enough affordable housing, but what leads to that is different in a rural area, different in an urban area, a small city, a big city, a town. And so I'm very excited that people are coming together, I think, across the political spectrum to think about how we can give more choices.
No, I know you don't want to be too wonkish, but what about your ideas? You had at least a couple, maybe?
Yeah, so in housing, I'm looking at ways to release assets so that municipalities can have more leverage. So one of the things that I'm doing is, I didn't realize, I was wondering, why are our state-owned properties, or state-encumbered properties would be a little bit more accurate, particularly where housing developments rest, so state-subsidized properties, why aren't they kept up as well sometimes as the federally owned when we're losing all our federal money? And one of the reasons for that, for example, in a part of my district in Brookline, is that housing authorities are not able to use the value of the land as an asset. And so I've written a bill with the help of many to address that and to allow that land equity to be part of the mix that communities and municipalities can put in when they're looking for financing for projects and for development.
Another concern is transportation. We have a relatively radical idea for City Councilor Michelle Wu, is that maybe we shouldn't have T fares. We should fund it differently.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that will work, but I'm excited to talk to Councilor Wu about it. I think what we really need to do in the short term, in addition to innovative ideas about completely restructuring the system, is to find reliable revenue. And one of the things that I'm doing on that's very tiny, but again, I'm new, so I'm hoping to build a book of business around generating revenue and generating new ideas for how we can get, if not revenue, other sources of financing. One of those is I'm taking a look at the results of the Tax Expenditure Commission that it was put together by statute in 2011, produced a great report in 2012. And so my bill says, what are we doing with those results? The results said there are certain types of tax credits that we're giving that are performing for us in terms of return on investment, and others that aren't. And what have we done in response to that? We need to recapture that money that's not giving us the bang for our buck, and that type of recapture can be used for transportation.
What about some of the rules changes that are sort of percolating right now? Anything that's of interest that you think we should know about?
Well, there's so many rules changes that we'd like to see happen over the course of the next few sessions. And so we got a great start this time with having people stand for roll calls. Most of the rules changes didn't get passed, but some of them were actually incorporated through discussion into the original package. But we didn't see as much change as we wanted with regards to transparency, more reporting out of committees, things that make roll calls a bit easier, giving us more time to review our bills. But what we did see is a lot more people standing for that than have in previous sessions. And so we hope that over time we'll be able to negotiate, those of us who stood, hope that over time we'll be able to negotiate greater change in that area. And we think because there were roll calls, voters can speak clearly to their representatives, and because I'm on the House side, the Senate side I think did a little bit more than we did in that regard. But on the House side, I think once the reps are hearing from their constituents, they will stand as well.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with the new state representative in Jamaica Plain and Mission Hill and Rosendale, Nika Elugardo. Nika, one of the other things that happened at the very beginning of your term here is the vote for House leadership. Normally, people just do the routine thing. They vote for the incumbent speaker if he or she wants another term.
Right.
You voted president. What was that about?
Well, my life's work has been in leadership development, and so I had a few conversations with Speaker DeLeo before the vote. I said, I can't vote for leaders that don't present to me a vision for their leadership. And one of the key challenges that I'm seeing as a newcomer is that the culture can become a bit toxic and fear-driven. People don't want to vote against you. What is your plan for helping people understand that that's not the culture you want to develop? And, he agreed with me that he wanted to keep working on the culture, but I wasn't satisfied with his response. And so I told him, well, I'll watch what you do over the next couple of years, but I can't vote for you. He asked me for some ideas. I gave him those ideas, and he was amenable to the conversation. And some of that, I think, got translated into some of the negotiations around rules. I'm not sure. I haven't been in those back rooms, but I think he's going to keep working on it because I think voters keep standing for change in that regard. Like we want a House of Representatives that functions democratically and where representatives feel independent in their ability to stand for votes. And some do and some don't.
Unpack that a little bit more about changing the culture. What else would you like to see done?
Well, so culture shift takes a long time, but it can't really happen without top leaders giving some sort of a statement of what the vision is we're looking for. And so what I'd like to see is our leadership say, oh, look, we're noticing that people aren't voting off of the speaker. They always vote with the speaker, the majority of people. Is that because you always agree with the speaker? I don't know about that. So we want critique. Critique is healthy. And what becomes toxic is if people are worried about making decisions because they fear retaliation from leadership, not necessarily just the speaker. They feel there might be social retaliation, they might not get certain positions, they might not get certain appointments. And this is something a lot of reps talk about, and some don't even mind. That's just a reality they're fine navigating. I think that in the season that we're in this country, where Massachusetts needs to lead, people need to be fearless. They need to be bold, regardless of their political disposition. They need to be willing to lose. That's my opinion. And I think a healthy democratic culture is one where every single representative feels free to stand without retaliation for the votes that they believe in, and is able to do that in public and in private.
One of the other issues that came up during the campaign last year was the Safe Communities Act, which would
Sure.
have limited state and local cooperation with federal immigration enforcement. It sputtered, especially in the House of Representatives. Was that just a leadership problem, or was that the fundamental political landscape of the state?
Well, I think the two prongs that you put out there, leadership problem and the fundamental sort of structure of our state culture around those issues right now, are interconnected. There's two types of leadership problems, right? There's leaders that stop good things from happening, and leaders that don't provide the bold leadership to make good things happen and to facilitate that. I think we needed a bolder, a better informed leadership on the House side than we had last time. Now, there were bold, well-informed leaders, but you were not seeing that coming out of the House of Ways and Means, for example, which is one of the reasons why I was running. I think that if leadership was great and on top of their money, we'd still have to deal with the messaging problem. So a lot of people across the district that I've talked to, even when I was door knocking for my colleagues, they believe that Safe Communities Act is something that it wasn't. They believe it was going to give a safe harbor to criminals who were dangerous. They believe that it made Massachusetts a sanctuary state, which it did not do. And so we need better messaging, better information that helps conservatives, Republicans, Democrats, liberals, socialists understand our common language around fairness and justice and due process for every resident of Massachusetts, regardless of their documentation. That's something I think we can all get behind, and hopefully this session we will.
You know, a few months ago we were all talking about the changes that couldn't wait. Is that just a political moment, or do you think that you're going to be able to connect those things? You know, we only have a few new reps in the State House from Boston. Is there a way to sort of bring that together, work with some people outside the State House to really have a continuation of change?
Right, so change can't wait. That was Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley's slogan.
Her slogan, yes.
I tended to say change is now. I mean, things are changing. The question is the legislature going to change with things that are changing? And I think the answer to that is yes. I think you have 25 amazing first years that have come in together. Republicans, Democrats, progressives, people with socialist leanings like myself. And we're about collaboration and coalition building. I have experienced that from more tenured folks as well, all the way right up through leadership. I think it's an exciting time where people are realizing Massachusetts has to be strong, and we have to be strong together, and the legislature has to lead in that. And so I think it's going to be a great year. I think this time next year and at the end of the session, we're going to have a lot of really good news to report.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Nika Elugardo, the new state representative from the 15th Suffolk and Norfolk District.